of every item in the gift shop. And it is getting pretty close to holiday time. Great opportunity for some science or environmental gifts or presents for your loved ones. So that's, for the moment, that's the end of my presentation. Again, I welcome you here on behalf of the South Florida Science Center, our Board of Trustees, and our staff. As you may know, we have 14 educators here, all of them certified. We have a fleet of 6 vehicles, and we do, many of you know this, we do outreaches to schools for math nights, STEM nights, and STEAM nights. We do about 125 of those visits every year at about 5 o'clock. It usually starts around 5 o'clock after the school bell has rung. And the school district is very supportive of these because we bring pizza and the kids can bring their families in. So it's seen as a fun event and it doesn't get in the way of, I know, the restrictions you all have on field trips and other kinds of things, because we bring a table, we set up tables in your lunchroom or in your gym with about 20 or so different science exercises. Sometimes we bring members of the Palm Beach Symphony out and they do some things with sound waves, or we bring other arts and cultural organizations out with it. It's a great opportunity to do an event. All you need is some volunteers from your PTA or whatever, and we have a team out there too. We bring all the stuff, and then after it's over, we take it all out and everything is just the way it was before. And you know the school superintendent's office has secret shopped this event on a number of times. They've snuck some people in just to see whether people like this, and every time it's been a big hit. They love it. So think about our math nights, our STEM nights, and our STEAM nights. We did 125 of those, not just in district schools. We went all the way down to Florida Keys and all the way up to the Treasure Coast. These are very, very popular. And our museum actually ranks number 5 in the country in terms of the number of interactions, students that we've interacted with. Last year was 101,000 students in these various schools. So we're punching above our weight because this is compared to much, much larger museums than ours. So once again, enough of my commercials. Let me introduce to you a person whom I know many of you know very well, our Director of Education, Carla Duhaney.
Okay, our speaker today is former astronaut Bob Crippen. Bob was the pilot of the first space shuttle flight in April 1981 and went on to command 3 other space shuttle missions. He has logged more than 565 hours in space and orbited the Earth 374 times. After graduating from the University of Texas, Bob spent 30 years in the United States Navy. He was an attack pilot aboard the USS Independence and then became a flight inspector at the Edwards Air Force Base in California. In 1969, he was selected as a NASA astronaut and was on the support crew for the Skylab 2, 3, and 4 missions and the Apollo-Soyuz test project. Bob became the director of the Space Shuttle program at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., and then the director of the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. He entered the private sector as vice president at Lockheed Martin in Orlando, then served as president of the Thiokol Propulsion Company in Utah. Captain Crippen has received numerous awards, including the Distinguished Flying Cross from the U.S. Navy, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Federal Aviation Administration Award for Distinguished Service, the Goddard Memorial Trophy, the National Geographic Society Hubbard Medal, the Aviation Hall of Fame Award, the American Legion Distinguished Service Medal, and all these are leadership and service medals from NASA. He was inducted into the Astronaut Hall of Fame and the Aerospace Walk of Fame and was enshrined in the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 2016. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for Space. Also, he is a fellow in the Society of Experimental Test Pilots and is a member of the National Academy of Engineering. Bob retired in 2001 and lives in North Palm Beach, Florida with his wife, Pandora. Let us all welcome Bob Crippen as the 2017 STEM Open House keynote speaker.
very much for that warm welcome. Let's see if I can get this loose. Does that still work? Yeah, it does. Well, thank you. As you can tell from that intro, I'm older than dirt because I've been around a long time. But one of the things I would like to say is I'm very pleased to have all of you whose time is very valuable come out and participate in this STEM event. STEM is an extremely important subjects that we need to be studying for this country's economic as well as its military security. Sometimes some other countries are doing better than we are, but we don't do bad. I mean, this last astronaut selection, when the astronaut program is a little bit, I would say, it doesn't have a real good focus right at this point. This last selection, they had over 18,000 people apply for a dozen positions. And they were a lot of highly qualified people. And I'm just glad I didn't have to participate to get on board with them. It was a lot different when I got into NASA. As Lou indicated, I am a strong supporter of the Science Center, mainly because some kids look at subjects related to STEM as being a little bit difficult. And if you can make those fun, you can get them interested in it. And that's what you really need to do and get them interested in. I'm sure all of you out here know that. And incidentally, I have to say that I have a daughter and a granddaughter who are teachers back in Texas, but they do focus on the STEM subjects. I joined the astronaut office, as was indicated in the intro, in 1969 during the time when we were landing on the moon. I was a junior guy, so I didn't get to land on the moon, but I got to do a lot of other exciting things, as was indicated in the intro. But one of the things I was really doing was engineering work. I got to help in the development of Skylab, which was our first space station. I got to help, I got interested in being a soldier of the Cold War. I had an opportunity to go over to Russia when we did a joint mission, a docking mission with them in 1975. And then mainly during that period, I was working on the development of the space shuttle. In fact, when I had joined the program, the boss at that time says, well, I don't know if I have a chance for you to fly until around 1980 on this thing they're talking about called a space shuttle. And that still looked like the best deal in town to me, so myself and 6 of my buddies signed up to work during this period because he said, I've got lots of work for you to do. So I saw the development of the space shuttle from the drawing board. And at that time, in the late 70s, our astronaut office had dwindled down to about 25 people. And we started going out and hiring some new astronauts, but I thought I would have a chance to get on one of the early flights because there weren't that many people, but I was really surprised when I got asked if I wanted to fly the first one. I thought that that would be a sign to a couple of guys that had flown previously, because the ship on its initial configuration, you could only put 2 people on board, and I'll go into that a little bit later. And John Young, who was our most experienced astronaut, I figured we'd get the first one, and then we'd get one of the other guys that had flown. So when they asked me if I'd like to go on the first one, I was ready to turn handsprings. That was a really exciting moment. And getting to work with John Young, a Floridian. If you've ever been in Orlando, and you've probably driven down John Young Boulevard. John used to tell me, he says, Crip, they shouldn't name something like that after you until you're dead. Somebody's going to have an accident on it and will sue me. John is one of the funniest guys that I've ever had a chance to work with. He's got a dry sense of humor, so sometimes people don't get it, but he is funny. I had just written a book copying down all of his one-liners when we were training together out at sold that and gotten rich and retired a long time ago. What John and I were assigned to that first flight. Folks stand up, we got lots of seats down here.
Come on
You know,
down.
there's plenty of room.
Plenty of room.
Unless you're trying to escape by we were assigned the flight in 1979, and we thought we might fly in 1980. Actually, we spent 3 years in training because of these things that we had that were not exactly going according to plan. The main engines, which takes the vehicle into orbit, were blowing up on the test stand over in Mississippi, and we didn't think that was very good. We have a thermal protection system on the shuttle that was what we call tiles. They're almost like styrofoam. And they kept falling off. The glue wasn't working. And that wasn't very good either. John and I thought, well, hey, maybe we ought to fix those before we go fly. And thank goodness management agreed. Consequently, we were in training for like 3 years. I guess you would call it training is what we were doing. And all the guys in the astronaut office knew that we had to get out of the road and fly before they could fly. And they were getting a little bit irritated and saying, hey, instead of young and crippin', it's going to be old and crippled by the time those guys go. But eventually it did happen. And, we tried on April the 10th of 1981, a long time ago, 36 years, I guess, to go one time, and we had a little computer problem and had to stand down until we understood that. So on April the 12th, we lifted off on board the space shuttle. It was an exciting time. We hadn't flown in space from the U.S. since 1975, so it was like a 6-year hiatus, which is similar to what we're going through now. But it was certainly an exciting moment for me. John used to tell me, he says, Cripp, if they're getting ready to light off 7 million pounds of thrust under you, and you aren't a little bit excited, you don't understand what's going on. We both knew what was going on. And let me tell you, when those 7 million pounds of thrust lifted off, you knew you were headed someplace. The space shuttle took off in a very rapid manner. It was a nice kick in the pants when those solid rockets lit. And I was selected to be an astronaut on a military space program when I was 28 years old. I was 43 when I lifted off on STS-1. So it took a while. So sometimes you have to be tenacious to get what you want, and I'll tell you, it was worth waiting for. From the time you're sitting on the pad to you're going 17,500 miles an hour is like 8.5 minutes. And if Disney could can that ride, they'd make a lot more money than they already did. And it's a kind of an interesting ride on the shuttle because the G level wasn't that high. It only goes up to like 3 Gs, 3 times what you normally weigh, and we actually throttled the engines to not exceed that. We didn't do that for the crew. We did it for the payloads we'd be carrying, so we didn't break any of them. But when the solid rockets come off, I'll tell you, I really thought all of the engines had quit. We'd been going 3 Gs, and all of a sudden we were going about half a G, but the main thing was it got quiet. Up until that time, it had been shaking, and it was loud, really loud. But when the solid rockets came off, it was just as quiet as you sitting there in that chair. But then you accelerate on out, and as I said, end up going up 17,500 miles an hour. So it is one ride that's very enjoyable. I just wish I could have done it a few more times. But when the engines shut down, you're weightless. Now, weightless means gravity's not there, so you're falling around the earth and you're floating. It's a delightful experience. It really is. About half the people that go into space, their tummy doesn't like it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I was not one of those. I did have one crew member ventilated there, but things, you have to get used to things floating. I was just reading that our astronaut that's just spent a year up in the International Space Station, he had to get used to things not floating when he got back down on the ground. That's one delightful experience that everybody that goes, after about 2 days, they kind of adapt to it, so it doesn't last all that long. The other big thing about being in space is having a chance to look out the windows at this beautiful spaceship Earth that we're all fortunate enough to live on. It's a beautiful place, it really is. And I've never flown with anybody in space or known anybody that's ever gone to space that didn't come away with a new respect for this environment we have is pretty fragile. Now, I'm not a tree hunter, but I believe that we ought to try to take care of the place. If you look out at the horizon when you're in space, it's a really thin line wrapped around the Earth, and that's our atmosphere. It's about like if you took, say, a basketball and wrapped it in aluminum foil. And the aluminum foil, that thickness, would be what's keeping us all alive down here. And when I was on board the shuttle, I wouldn't let anybody except me and one other person work the environmental control system on board because that was what was keeping us alive. So down here we've got everybody mucking with the control system and nobody knows what's going on. I was fortunate to fly on that first flight, which was strictly a test flight. All we wanted to do was to make sure we could get the vehicle up, test out the systems, and bring it back down and land in California, which that took about 2.5 days, and it was exciting for me all the way around. We were primarily making sure that the shuttle could deploy a payload fly that had been launched unmanned to study the sun's maximum phase with all the solar bursts going on. And some gyroscopes that keep it stable had failed, and they wanted us to go up, rendezvous with it, catch it, and repair it. So that was the first time we done a rendezvous with the shuttle, was come up and join up with this particular satellite, grab it, and I won't go. It took us a little while to get the thing because it was giving us some problems, but we got it, put it in the bay, and 2 of our crew members went out and repaired it, doing things that really weren't meant to be done in a spacesuit. They were disconnecting, finding small little connectors, and did some work that was pretty delicate to be doing in a spacesuit. In fact, when they came back into the fingers were all bloodied, but because working in spacesuits is not nice, especially doing what they were doing. And my last flight was more of a Earth studying flight. We were using cameras and radars to study the Earth. That was Sally flew with me on that flight also. That was her second and last flight, unfortunately. And that flight also got some notoriety because we did a spacewalk. And that was the first time we had an American woman do a spacewalk. Kathy Sullivan did that. Kathy is a very smart lady. She just recently retired as the director of NOAA. So I was going to fly a 5th flight. I was going to command the first flight out of the West Coast at Vandenberg Air Force Base, where we were going to do military missions. We launched here out of the Kennedy Space Center. We launched essentially due east to take advantage of the Earth's rotation, which gives you some initial speed, and you don't have to fly over any land when you drop those solid rockets and your external tank and so forth. The military, they want to get better coverage of the Earth. So you'll launch out of California. There's a place just north of Los Angeles at the Vandenberg Air Force Base where you essentially launch due south and fly over the poles. So you're going over the South and North Pole, and you get to see the entire Earth in great detail. And of course, that was what those missions were all about. Unfortunately, we then lost the Challenger in 1986, January 28th. I lost some very good friends on that. And at that time, the Air Force decided hey, maybe we don't want to fly on the space shuttle. So that mission was canceled, and I got rooted off into management to try to get the thing back flying again, flying safely. And I worked as a deputy director of the program for a while, and then I went up to Washington and worked as a director of the space shuttle program. Working in Washington is not one of my favorite things. I did manage to escape, as was indicated in the introduction, and come down and run the Kennedy Space Center, which was a great job. I really enjoyed that. So I've had a fantastic career as far as I'm concerned. I've done things that I couldn't even imagine when I was a kid in school. At that time I wanted to fly, but I didn't. Nobody was going in space at that point. So I'm very pleased with. I have made some choices that worked out for me pretty well. I grew up in a little country school. We had like 20 people in my graduating class. I had to teach the teacher that was trying to teach us algebra, more about algebra than. But I went from there. I got to the University of Texas and managed to get a degree in aeronautical engineering or aerospace engineering. And it was that education that allowed me to do the things that I ended up doing. And that's one of the reasons I try to reinforce that with groups like you, that studying those hard subjects can be very productive to you later on in life. Right at this particular point, where we are in the human spaceflight program, I'm not very proud of. But I wanted to try to describe to you what's going on now, because it gets very fuzzy a lot of times just seeing the paper. First, as was indicated, the International Space Station has been up and flying with crews on board since 2001. So it's been up for 16 years operating and doing good science, and we're learning a lot. Unfortunately, to get crews up to the International Space Station, we have to send them to Russia. The Russians have got a good, reliable program, but for a guy that grew up in the Cold War, that's doesn't sound that way. Anyway, and we have developed the capability to take supplies up to the International Space Station with some vehicles launched here in the United States. SpaceX, which you've probably all heard of. In fact, they got a launch coming up next month going up there. They have a capsule they call Dragon. It goes up and rendezvous and docks with the International Space Station and gets crews supplies. In fact, the Dragon can also return things down, and they can pick them up out in the ocean. Another company called Orbital ATK also launches. They launch up from Wallops Island in Virginia. And they have a capsule that goes up and takes up supplies. So we got those two ways of getting supplies up right now, and there are a couple other companies working to add on to that. We're also trying to be able to launch crews again, and SpaceX is one of the companies that's trying to do that, and the other is Boeing. Both of those companies hope to be able to launch crews into space starting around, I keep slipping, but somewhere like 2019, I think, is what they'll probably be able to do. And in the meantime, we still have to use the Russians. But in addition to that work with the International Space Station, the decision was made some time ago that we ought to be able to get out of what we call low Earth orbit, which is what the station is doing. We ought to be able to go back out into the vicinity of the moon and even further. And so NASA has a company building a large rocket that didn't give it a very sexy name. It's called a Space Launch System. But it's going to be bigger than the Saturn V rocket that we used to go to the moon with. And we're also have another company, Lockheed Martin, building a capsule that's similar to what we used to go to the moon, only somewhat larger, carries a crew of 4. And we hope to be able to launch that, the Space Launch System, there are SLS, in the around 2019 as well. And it looks like, though, that the first time we'll put a crew, which would go out and go around the moon, like we did on Apollo 8, would be around 2021. So those are going on right now. We've had a problem with what are we going to do with those during this last administration. I think we're going to end up with where we're at now, currently, and landing people back on the moon, where we go to prove that we can live and work up there, as opposed to do a couple of day mission like we did back in the Apollo program. Eventually, we'll get to Mars. I don't think I'll ever live to see that, but eventually we will. And, you know, I know that we'll get back to the moon one day. Well, I know we'll get back to Mars. I can't exactly tell you when, but I do know that one of the primary drivers that will make it happen are teachers. You are bringing up the generations that are going to make that possible, and your inspiration to attending events like you're doing right now is what's going to enable you to be able to do that. Well, thank you very much for coming out and listening to me, and I will try to answer a few questions if don't make them too hard. I know teachers. Yes, sir.
Did you ever fly for the airlines?
No.
No.
I'm a naval aviator. I went out and flew off aircraft carriers.
What
Yes.
was the scariest thing that ever happened to you in space?
Scariest thing that ever happened to me in space. Well, I found as commander, one of the things, when I had a crew member go outside the spacecraft, that's very nerve-wracking. It used to give me a headache most of the time. But on that third mission, we gave one of my crew members, Pinky Nelson, a backpack, a maneuvering unit, and he flew around 300 feet away from the shuttle and was trying to dock with this little device he had to that Solar Max satellite. And when he went up to dock with it, it didn't capture, but Solar Max started tumbling a little bit. And he tried again, and every time he tried, the motor would tumble. And I was really getting worried. And I was, okay, so I told him, come back. I mean, I could fly the shuttle over to pick him up, but so we sort of met each other. And then we tried to grab that satellite when it was tumbling around with the arm. That didn't work. Unfortunately, the ground was able to stabilize it so that it was just slowly rotating, and when they did that, we were able to get it while it was maneuvering. I guess, I'm not sure scared is the right word, but worried.
I mean, that satellite was orbiting too along, and so he was trying to catch a moving object in a moving object.
We were both going 17,500 miles an hour. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that the space program from all the countries might be the answer to some sort of peace or global peace?
Well, if you couldn't hear the question, is would working internationally help bring peace on the Earth? Through the space program. And I'm not sure that it actually could, but I can tell you from the International Space Station, which is, working Russia, all the European nations, Japan, we've been able to work great together with all those. And if we go back to the moon, like I forecast, I think it's going to have to be internationally. So it can't help but help somewhat. It's not going to hurt to try to learn to work together and do things together. But these are troubled times, as you well know. Yes, ma'am.
How do you feel about the sort of shift towards private companies taking over the advances in the research? How do you feel about that as opposed to it being more of a government-driven?
Sure. How do I feel about the private companies getting more involved? I guess I'll say. I was concerned about how fast we were going to be dependent on them, but I'm very pleased with what SpaceX and Orbital have been able to do with regard to being able to put payloads up. I think that's really great. As I said, we're trying to get those companies where they're going to launch our crews. I think that's great as well. What NASA needs to be focused on are things that are more expensive and more far-reaching. So going back to the moon, at least initially, I think NASA's going to be in the lead there. I know Elon Musk has talked about going to Mars and whatever. And more power to him if he can, but I don't think that's going to happen for a long time. But I believe the government's role is in the far reaches. I mean, the stuff they're doing now in low Earth orbit is stuff that NASA started working on back in the 60s.
What's it like to ride in the shuttle when it lands?
What's it like to ride in the shuttle when it lands? It's pretty close to coming in on a commercial airliner out here at PBI. Really? It's not a high G load. You don't get more than maybe 1.5 Gs at that. And if you watch any of the touchdowns on TV, very nice touchdown. So it's surprisingly, it's not violent or anything. It's a very pleasant ride. Now, up and away, when you first start hitting the atmosphere, it starts, if you're in the dark, it starts to glow pink around the spacecraft. And it's very hot out there. So, on the nose it gets up to around 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But so it's very warm, but you don't feel any of that sitting inside. It's good air conditioning system.
This is a long-winded question. But last summer I had the opportunity to meet Josh Casada, who was astronaut class 2015, so he's currently in training.
Right.
I asked this question, how is it like becoming an astronaut? And his response was, it's kind of like playing the lottery, and that one, you have to be lucky, and two, you have to have plan B. Do you agree with him?
I agree. You have to be lucky. I mentioned the numbers, 18,000 plus for a dozen positions, and so NASA can be very picky, and not everybody's going to get it. And so you ought to have some other objective goal in mind if that doesn't work out. But life is like that.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Okay.
She's got her hand up, I think.
Okay.
What kind and how long, is the physical training before you take off on the shuttle?
How long is the physical training?
What do you have to do?
Surprisingly enough, NASA still doesn't have a physical program. They've got a gym available to us, and you can go do what you think is right.
So you really don't have to
So
do anything?
you don't have to go through any kind of strenuous program at all.
You'll see that in the astronautic, in the exhibit. You'll see the physical facilities that are on the International Space Station.
And now, when you're
up there.
when you're flying, if you want to keep your body in shape, you need to do lots of exercises that stress the skeletal system and keep your heart rate up. And you guys and gals are doing at least a couple hours of those kind of exercises while they're on orbit. But they don't have to do that. They initially go.
One more question?
One more question.
I was going to ask a similar question about, what was the most strenuous part of your training? Either mentally or physically. I know you were obviously a military pilot, and thank you for your service and all that too. But I can't be that easy.
There were challenges, but probably the thing that some people might consider tough, but I always thought it was fun, is we go through a lot of simulations and simulators where we have people sitting there throwing malfunctions at you that you are trying to resolve, and if you don't resolve them right, you die. It's in the simulator, so it isn't all that stressful. But there were times we went through some pretty exciting sims, but there was all, certainly in retrospect, a heck of a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun here talking to you. Thank you very much.
Let me just say, probably the thing, if you all listen to Bob, probably that, you ask what makes an astronaut different. and something that Bob said sort of struck me. When he said, I had the chance to fly and go 17,600 miles an hour, I turned cartwheels. How many of you would do that if you had that opportunity? Not all of us, I'm sure. Listen,
Population's about 50.
I do want to make one presentation. I hope you'll be here. Bob has been really one of our great supporters over the years at the Science Center. Bob and his wife, Pandora. And so, since he's here before a group of people, I do want to present him with this Science Center crystal that says, with grateful appreciation for providing the leadership model which inspires growth and success. And then a quote, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and beheld. Service was joy. Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you all very much for coming, and we hope that you'll enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you. I was a kid in I got to stay home on that Friday at 10, and then you guys did take off on Friday. Yeah, we got to talk to the station last year, so thank you so much for doing this.
That's right. I know.
Isn't it? Yeah, that's what it's all about. Well, there's some that are over at the zoo, and some are still kind of circulating.
Yes. Take care.
Thank you.
We sent you an invitation for our space station contact last year, but we got confused with Matthew. And in a 1 week time frame, our contact date changed 3 times. Thank you for everything you've done.
Yes, we're sorry to you saw Carla here.
I know that. I know Eric is.
Are you going to watch stuff?
Well, that's his name.
Thank you.
Watch the show. For many years, going to
Yes.
shuttle landing.
Thank you, Bob. Great job. Thank you all for coming. Glad you guys are here. Thank you.
I'm from my country safari. It was a pleasure to meet you. I've got Sarah, and Jennifer's going to take our picture.
Okay.
This is your pen.
Jump in. Okay.
Jump in. 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. Thank you so much. No, we lost about 200 trees, but you wouldn't even know it. So we're good.
Oh, this man needs laptop. Looks like he's working here.
We're doing a lab
tonight on transmission.
Great to meet you.
HIV viruses. There you go.
Someone thanks you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. I appreciate it.
Yes, but
My kids are obsessed with the idea of going to Mars. And I'm like, look, I met an astronaut. They'll be
How pretty. 1, 2, 3. I think there we go. I got. Do you want me to do the second one?
Sure.
Okay, just in case. I'm a little bit of a Luddite.
Thank you very much. It was nice to meet you.
So excited.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
All right.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay, let me get you.
Hi, how are you?
1, 2, 3. Thank you so much.
Your
You want me
physics
to
club
push
is
your
going to
button?
be so jealous.
Oh, my physics club is going to be like crazy.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
1, 2, 3. Oh, hang on, I hit it for like 1, 2, 3. Gotcha.
It's 3, 2.
Yeah, you're more used to 3, 2, 1, aren't you?
Sir, were you as exuberant as John Young when you landed? Because you look at those videos, he's jumping all over.
I'll tell you about that.
I am going to go break.
He had calmed down, but kind of got out of the cockpit. You should have seen him inside. It was really. Two levels inside the cockpit. We had to I was sitting there since I had switches to throw.
How are you? Thank you so much for speaking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was still singing system. John was out of the cockpit, running downstairs, climb back up.
I just wanted to introduce myself. I actually grew up watching shuttles go off in my backyard.
I did say I grew up in Jensen Beach. I wasn't that far, so
Yeah,
watching them.
Edgewater, Volusia County.
Oh, yeah, you're
so
much
really too
closer.
close. Yeah.
Yes.
And now I take my students to NASA. I often do every year. It's like my tribute. I don't know. We love
Yeah,
it.
that's they really do a nice job with the space.
Thank you.
Thank you again, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Nice stuff.
Hello. How are you?
Hi. It's very nice to meet you, and thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Maybe you can talk to this young man into taking a picture.
Just there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you. Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
I think we should do.
Thank
you again.
Thank you for coming.
You mind if I grab one picture with you? Dean just finished his 1500th hour in Texas flying pipelines, getting ready for the airlines. That's all he thinks about. All right, thank you so much, sir.
What's your line?
Envoy. They're owned by American Airlines. One question.
You're a fighter pilot.
Well, I'm thinking about joining the reserves or something like that. How did it actually feel to take control of the shuttle? At what point do you take control of it physically? And how did it feel?
We tried in different ways, but essentially what they honed in on is you set up for a high key approach at around 50,000 feet. And that's about when you go subsonic. So as soon as you go to Mach 1 overhead of the field, is when you put over. And the shuttle's a 5-wire system, similar to what the Airbus uses, kind of, but we have a control stick that's not a side stick, but it's in the middle. And it's very smooth. I mean, it's a nice flying machine, and it responds very, just like, well, we tuned that system to make it fly like we like. It's a nice flying machine. It's not violent.
And the only difference was you knew you only had one chance.
And we practiced. We had modified a Gulfstream 2 to simulate the way the shuttle flies. It did a pretty good job. We used a model follower system on it, and it simulated like it was flying like a shuttle. We reversed the thrusters in flight to get the drag. And and both John and I had like 1,600 approaches in that airplane before we ever went out.
So you had it just down.
We were pretty confident.
Yeah. Okay.
Not that we don't, but it did well. Thank you.